As I mentioned at the outset of the service, this is my annual State of the Parish address, and it marks the 260th year of St. Mark's Church. St. Mark's Episcopal Church did not get started until the 1780s. This is the day in which we take stock and have, in some sense, a stockholders meeting afterward. For all of those who are members here, you are shareholders with all those rights and privileges and responsibilities. So a few words about our church, our community. And when I was on sabbatical, I was often asked about the parish where I served, and I said things like this, that St. Mark's is a community of love in a broken world, and the soul of the congregation is the living flame of love. It is the living Christ who is caught and taught in our midst, and that the charism and the culture and the hallmark of who we are as a church is the spiritual warmth we feel for everybody who walks in our door and the way we care for each other. Sometimes when I see all of you caring for each other, I say, I feel sorry for people who are not members of our church. And in this way, we are a new commandment community, for the only commandment that Jesus gave to us was to love one another as he has loved us. By that, people will know that you are my disciples. We welcome and delight in everyone who walks in our doors, and there are no exceptions to that. And every person who is associated with us in any way adds to the spiritual energy of the whole and the holy. And as you know from our dismissal, together we seek a deeper life in Christ, a more holy communion with one another, and a greater love for the world. And that we are seriously committed and we don't take ourselves too seriously. And when this all gets mixed together like an enormous soup pot with the elixir of grace, St. Mark's makes the soul, S-O-U-L, difference in a huge number of people's lives. People's lives are touched, and some of them are even transformed. So in 2023 was a very, very blessed year for us as a community. The parish thrived in my absence when I was on sabbatical, and it proved several truths. And the first thing it proved is the truth that the congregation is the church, and that you have tremendous spiritual vitality and a magnetism. And C.S. Lewis said that Christ works in many ways, but primarily works through each of us, and that we are carriers of Christ. And that is so, so true as individuals and as a body. And my not being here also revealed what was already known, but it made it crystal clear, the giftedness and the hard work and the devoted care of Reverend Elizabeth, who stepped in for me many, many times. And my not being here also allowed us all to see the emergence of the deep and ever-growing gifts of Father John, who's come back home to be with us and to see what he has brought to us. My not being here also showed what you already know, which is the strength of the staff, overseen by Jill Sekulis, the Director of Operations. These are people who throw their lives at caring for all of you and to energize the ministry of the church. And my not being here also showed with great clarity the empowered and empowering leadership we have from the wardens, from Stan and Janet, from the executive committee. Add to that Tim Dan and Suzanne Harrison and Jill, and it showed the power of the vestry, and it also showed the power of the structure that is in the system of the body of Christ. We have 30 different committees and commissions in the body that take care of particular elements of the ministry. And there is one person I want to single out in my comments this morning, and it is Suzanne Harrison. Suzanne, this is her last day as clerk, and she served not only as the clerk, but as you may remember, as the co-chair of the Inspired by Love campaign. And in her roles, Suzanne has served all of you with incredible distinction and a passionate love for the parish and for each of you. And we owe Suzanne an enormous gift of thanks for all that she has done for us. I saw Suzanne yesterday in the emergency room in the hospital, and she looked phenomenal there too. Okay, so let me give you a brief sense of what happened in 2023. We as a church grew for the 16th year in a row. We have around 1,750 members and another 100 newcomers. We grew younger, we grew more diverse. We're about 5 generations if you count 20 years as a generation. Tomorrow is Edith Linger's 103rd birthday, and Edith, if you're watching, happy birthday. She's been a lifelong member in our midst here. And not only do we have somebody who's 103 years old, we have a nursery packed with kids who are 103 days old. We have a church school and children's choirs that are thriving. Youth ministry is being energized anew. Father John is off to Taizé in 2 weeks. And our preschool is harder to get into than Oxford. The preschool is booming and bursting for space. They could be much bigger. We just don't have enough space for them. And currently 32 children of the 68 are children of the parish. The world's greatest Christmas pageant was just that. For those of you who are here, you remember that. 950 people showed up, about 100 kids on the stage. This is a return to pre-COVID numbers. And as you will hear again today, the choirs of Ned the Maestro, the master of sacred music, have developed a depth of voicing that deepens our devotion, and it draws people from the community into our community. We had offerings on climate change and becoming beloved community, a men's retreat, and several faith forums. And we had our 4th Holy Land pilgrimage, leaving 2 weeks before the war broke out. And now more than 100 people from St. Mark's have been to the Holy Land and have enjoyed that transformative experience. We have robust pastoral care. I asked Reverend Elizabeth to characterize it, and she told me that there are 9 different groups that help to care for the congregation, helping to bear and lighten other people's burdens. And she said it's like the religio of religion. Religio is the Latin root word for religion, and it means ligaments. And our pastoral care teams are the ligaments and connective tissue that holds our parish together. We also produce our own spiritual content, and we share it with the world in increasing numbers. That includes our church services like we're having today. It includes our sermons. It includes Revved Up for Sunday podcasts, musical offerings, and other postings. And to give you some sense of this, on average, about 260 people show up in person for church on a Sunday, and another 140 people join us in the stream, which is one of the reasons I'm looking in the camera now and thanking those people who stream with us. They are a big, big part of our life. That's about 400 on a Sunday morning, and then another 20 to 50 people watch the services later on YouTube. And Beth Ralston said something the other day when we were going over these numbers in the staff meeting, and she said that people of the parish move away, but they spend their Sundays with us. We used to say that we wanted to be a parish without walls. That was the topic of one of the annual addresses, perhaps even in 2014, and we have become a parish without walls. The Revved Up for Sunday podcast, which I know that many of you follow, we've now done 134 Revved Up for Sunday podcasts in a row. That's almost 2.5 years worth. And right now, about 500 people listen to each of the Revved Up podcasts. And the listeners are all of you, from our congregation, and also from around the country, and a few from around the world. And it is constantly surprising and deeply heartening for the podmeisters when people tell us how much the podcast means to them. I was once bumped into Jeff Growney, a member here known to some of you, and Jeff asked me for a book recommendation on how he could deepen his spiritual life. And I said, well, there's a lot of books, but why don't you just listen to the podcast? And while I was away on sabbatical, he sent me an email saying that he had caught up and he had listened to every single one of the podcasts. I think he's the only one. I don't know. I haven't listened to all the podcasts. So anyway, Now, to give you a sense of the scale of this, the digital scale, the unseen stuff that we do not see, last year, 63,000 times, someone clicked on YouTube or one of the podcasts to see something that we produced here at St. Mark's. That is about 175 times a day. And if you were to string together all of that watching in 24-hour days, that would be 413 days in a row. And the truth is that our spiritual teaching is really still under the bushel basket. The staff does not have the bandwidth. The staff barely has the bandwidth to produce the podcast, but it doesn't have the bandwidth to promote it more widely. Excuse me. As you know, St. Mark's is deeply embedded in the community, and Mayfair is a phenomenon, and last year that phenomenon was phenomenal, and it was in great part because David Shea threw all of his phenomenal gifts at reorganizing Mayfair. It's about 500 volunteers who do all come to know the truth of what Jesus says, that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And it was an enormous undertaking and an enormous benefit to the church and to the community. And as you know, part of our outreach is to keep our doors open for people who want to come in and pray, but also for organizations who want to come in and meet here. As you know, the food pantry is located under Morrill Hall, and I think you'll find it of great interest, as I did, that there is a measurable uptick in food insecurity in New Canaan. The number of clients at the food bank has grown, in some sense, steadily for the past 16 years. The Gospel Garden goes a long way in addressing that, and as you know, the Gospel Garden goods could overfeed New Canaan, and they're also brought as far as Bridgeport to the food bank there. In Matthew 25, Jesus says, when did you feed me? And part of what we're trying to do is do the Jesus thing and feed people. As you know, we also have an outreach grants commission, and there we give money to organizations that are able to do that which we are not able to do. And we are at the local level. That's why churches make such a big deal in the care of communities, and we're at the local level with Laundry Love and the Samaritan Collections. And as you all know, there is a clergy discretionary fund that is used very, very quietly for those who cannot find help anywhere else. And last year, the donations from the discretionary fund went in a greater percentage to people of the parish than it has in years gone by. Some people assume that because we live in New Canaan, we live in the land of plenty and everybody has everything, and that is decidedly not true. We're also contribute on the national and international level to our diocese, to the national church, and in particular now to the Diocese of the Holy Land during the time of this tragic war. And more than 10%, probably about 12% of our budget goes out our door to help other people. We did other things for the organization. We balanced the budget. We hired 3 new people to replace others, Father John, Nancy Walton as the Director of Stewardship and Development, and Edgar Gonzalez to help to be a sexton and to live in the church house and to help Ed Hill. And all these people have already made immense contributions to our life together. We renovated the reredos, and then we actually replaced the light bulbs so you could see it. And we put the type of light bulbs in that are LEDs that last for an incredible amount of time. We went to work on the resurrection window. The HVAC in the church house now works. If you'll notice, for those who are long-term people, the church house no longer smells musty. It did for years. I used to smell musty myself when I lived there. And we have done a lot of other things. So there is so much that is a chock full of good newsness about this year, but more than one thing can be true at the same time, where we are both thriving and we have difficult challenges. Our greatest challenge is to to find resources for the thriving ministry. In our annual fund, we ask and invite people to give to the annual fund for a brief time from a limited number of households. In other words, those who are members. We are not like the New Canaan Foundation that can ask more broadly. And pledging, thoughtful pledging as a spiritual discipline is the primary funding mechanism for the church. Times they are a-changin', to go back to Bob Dylan here. It is increasingly challenging for us to raise the monies for the annual fund. There's a generational divide where many of the devout, many of you do not understand what pledging is. In addition, there is a new generation rising that feels that they will only support the church if they are moved to do so, and we can prove that we are worth it and that we are in need of it. And it is for us, even so, more difficult to get people's attention. You know, the attention marketplace is a very, very loud place. And so therefore, the church must spend more time raising resources rather than doing the ministry. As Janet Prill, our junior warden, will say at the annual meeting, she characterizes our finances as being a glass half full and a glass half empty. On the half full side of the ledger, we balanced the budget in 2023. We received more money to the annual fund than ever before, and the number of people giving to the annual fund grew for the third year in a row, and it returned to the number of people who gave in 2019 before the pandemic. On the half empty side of the ledger, we were only able to balance the 2023 budget because of some extraordinary gifts to the annual fund this year, and those gifts are non-reoccurring. And the number of pledges, if you plot it out, is kind of up and down, though it seems to be trending downward. And the pledging and giving patterns are changing, and this creates a great challenge for us in running the business. So the result is that we do fewer things. The result is also that we worry that there might be a significant shortfall at the end of the year, and we might not know that until December 10th or December 15th, when other money might or might not come in. And so we do spend time trying to solve the funding gap every single year. Overall, giving to the annual fund has been flat over the last 5 years. And moreover, as you will hear at the annual meeting, the 2024 annual campaign is itself flat, and therefore we are proposing a deficit budget. And the inconvenient truth is that we are chronically underfunded, and because of that, we are understaffed. To give you a sense of that, the current staff is a person and a half less than it was 10 years ago in 2014. And on a 12-person staff, that's a big deal. That's 18% smaller, even though we are paying attention and know 350 more people, and we have a digital ministry that didn't exist in 2014. So we have less staff to do more, and I just hope you'll think for a moment of how much more we could do if we were fully staffed. We know what we want to do, we just can't do it because the cup runneth over. One of our other great challenges is the paradox we face of engagement and disengagement. We have tremendous engagement, and you just heard the numbers of the engagement, tremendous engagement with the gospel and with the scriptures and with the community. And yet, since the pandemic, there has been an amorphous disengagement that is very hard for us to get a handle on. It's very hard and harder to get volunteers, to get new leadership. In fact, we don't even have a chair for Mayfair. And David has set up the chair for Mayfair in such a way that it's very, very doable. You no longer have to be Atlas to be the chair of Mayfair. And it also is harder for us to get people's attention in the annual pledge drive. And when we ask people, it's not so much out of lack of devotion to the church or the belief that we're, as a community, not doing it right. It just is the overfullness of people's lives. People are dissipated and distracted, and so many of us are barely hanging on. We just have a hard time tracking. And I mean, just throw a party and ask somebody to RSVP, and you'll see that most people can't do it. But what it ends up doing is, for the organization, it chews up time and energy, it adds uncertainty. It means that some leaders, start to burn out, and a lot of stuff starts to fall on the staff, and fewer things get done. And in this, we are not alone. If you read about nonprofits in the United States, if you read about the great arts nonprofits in New York City, or small town soup kitchens, or religious organizations across the country, you'll see that everybody is dealing with this amorphous disengagement that has set in our culture that seems to be overwhelmed. So with all this said and done, and as I try to describe the state of the parish, and I said to somebody, this is a little bit like taking a huge stew and trying to make a bouillon cube out of it and get it done before communion. I just want to add that there is no metric to fully measure the life of our community. There is no metric for the life of the soul. And there is no metric for what it's like when you're touched by God. And there is no metric for what it's like when people find St. Mark's to be their spiritual home and feel like they've come home. And there is no metric for people who are in such deep need that they can't find help anywhere, and so they come to the church. And I just have to say, there is no metric for what happens when your child dies and you are utterly devastated and the church shows up for you. There's no metric for that. And there's no metric for growth in love and faith and hope and meaning and purpose and strength and joy. There's no metric for the stuff that makes us human. No metric for it. And there's no metric for all of the interior changes that happen when people click on and listen to the podcasts and more deeply engage with the divine. And there is no metric for Francis, the pastoral pup, visiting the acute care area at Silver Hill, where the patients will not even talk. They're so undone, but they will talk to Francis. And there is no metric for the joy of the world's greatest Christmas pageant. The only thing I can say that's close to that is a funny story I heard from somebody who told me that they have a friend who went to another church on Christmas Eve and drove by St. Mark's and could barely get by because the cars were everywhere. And this person said, "What the heck is happening in that building?" And there is no metric for you. Just no metric. Imagine if we tried to take 1,750 people, individuals as they are, and take a metric of their spiritual life in the meaning of this church to them. As many of you know, on the giving statement that you receive from the church, the small type at the bottom comes from the IRS. And it says, "Unless otherwise noted, the only goods and services provided are intangible religious benefits." And there it is. I love it. The IRS tells us the truth. They have a bad reputation these days. We are in the intangible religious benefit business, and we have been for 260 years. But because these religious benefits are intangible, does not mean that they are not real. That which is intangible to the IRS is tangible to the soul. In fact, for those who have an experience of the divine, they all agree on one thing. Everybody agrees across all religions. And it is the conviction that the intangible divine is the most real of all, and everything else is just passing. We come, we go, that's it. But the intangible divine is forever. And if you take a look at the mega research, it is shocking for those who are religious enjoy unbelievable benefits of a longer life, better mental health, better life satisfaction. The list goes on and on and on. I want to just finish by just saying a word about God. I mean, Evelyn Underhill, a great mystic and scholar of mysticism in our tradition, said, she wrote a letter to the Archbishop of Canterbury and said, I think your clergy have forgotten that the interesting thing about religion is God. When I was on sabbatical, I had several overwhelming God experiences that flooded my soul with a divine love that it overwhelmed me, and it completely changed me. It rewired my soul. And if I had one thing I could give to all of you, I would give you my experiences so they could be your experiences. I had one thing that I could wish for everybody in the world, and for you in particular, was that each of you would experience God, the divine, as alive and personal to you, so that you could experience this divine love and know at the deepest level that you are loved and that you are okay just as you are. Only in the United States do we try to boil everything down to statistics when it comes to religion. I mean, the rest of the world would find this utterly quizzically and befuddling, wouldn't even begin to understand it. But I wonder, and I would love you to wonder with me, the truth is, we are all going to meet the divine. It doesn't matter if we go to church, don't go to church, go to synagogue, don't go to, it doesn't matter. But I think, dang, why are we in business? What are we doing? Isn't the purpose of our whole core business that we would all meet the divine and be blown away by it? Is that not what we're in business to do, to have mystical experience? And so I wonder, and wonder with me, what would it look like if we made it our core business that everybody who walks in our door gets blitzed by the divine? What if that was what we were trying to do? Because that's actually what our business is about. So it's time for me to go. I should have left about 25 minutes ago. But anyway, I would love it if you would wonder and ponder and think about it and pray on it. Because, you know, we should not just think we can only do what we're doing. We have so much more potential to be a mystical community in our community and in the world.